Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome to this webinar on the role of media in covering conflict. I thank Chanakya Forum for giving me this unique opportunity to come here as a guest moderator and contribute in this very significant initiative. Today, I have a sterling panel with me. I'd like to introduce Mr. G. Parthasarathy, former High Commissioner to Pakistan. I have Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain, who is former GOC 15 Corps and also Chancellor, the Kashmir University. I have Gaurav Sawant, Executive Editor, the India Today Group, Aarti Tikku Singh, who is, Aarti is covering national security and foreign affairs for the IANS. And I also have Anna Agnohim, who is the defense correspondent for Jerusalem Post. Anna joins us from Israel. A very warm welcome. And today we're going to talk about, as I said, the role of media in covering conflict. I go straight away to Mr. G. Parthasarathy, sir. You have handled media for the Prime Minister's office. You were in the hotspot, the hot seat, when you were in Pakistan, and also that interesting bit from your life that you said you promised you'll speak about, the Maldives operation in which the Para Brigade was involved. You yourself have served in the army. You're a war veteran, sir. So I'll start off from you, sir. What are your reminiscences, sir? How do you see media covering conflict during your times?
Thank you very much, Gaurav. It's very kind of you and nice to be with this audience. Well, 2.5 minutes for each. Starting with Maldives. I was then the information advisor of the Prime Minister. Got a call at 6 o'clock in the morning, told to rush to the Prime Minister's house. Found there was a cabinet meeting, that Maldives had been taken over by mercenaries, and that the Prime Minister and the Chief Justice had spoken to our Prime Minister and wanted urgent help. The Prime Minister immediately called a meeting of the cabinet. The army chief was there and the 3 service chiefs were there. It was decided that the Para Brigade would be lifted from Agra to Maldives. We did by that evening. And we meantime got enough intelligence of what was happening. The Para Brigade took off in the evening. I was told to assemble 30 media people and send them off to Maldives for that coverage of this actual situation and the operations. I arranged for 30 people to be rushed on an Air Force aircraft, thanks to Air Marshal Keeler. They reached there the same evening to cover it. We rescued Maldives from the terrorists who had taken it over within a matter of a day. So that was one. But the media was, I was told very clearly, foreign correspondents, Time Magazine, New York Times, we worked it out, contacted them and told them, we can't tell you where you're going, but you're headed to a place with the Indian Air Force. And they had a great time. We'd even arranged for that payments. The second thing I would like to refer to is Kargil. Kargil started with the Pakistanis, as usual, saying that the Mujahideen had captured the heights in the Kargil sector. I was in Islamabad, and then we found out from the Prime Minister's office that we had a tape of Musharraf speaking to his colleague. Aziz Musharraf was in Beijing. And when they started saying that this was Mujahideen and so on, so we also had a problem because it was Northern Light Infantry and the language they were talking was Balti. And not too many people as General Hasnain would watch for no Balti in the Indian Armed Forces. But we got around that from what was happening in Kargil. The operation, what we did was that we decided to go easy with the media. I spoke to the National Security Advisor, and we agreed we'd allow the Pakistani media in freely. Please come and see what's happening. We're quite relaxed about it. And what I did was I handed over the tape of the conversation saying that this is what is really happening. Your army chief talking to his chief of general staff from Beijing about what you guys are doing. And this is not Mujahideen. This is your regular army. And that, don't worry, we are quite relaxed about it. We've done it before and we'll do it again. We'll have you booted out. And really the media having an open policy played a great role because the Pakistanis hid everything. For us, it was open. They were even welcome in India. So I think, have I covered my 4 minutes or have I got another minute? So the idea is really be frank with the media. You can't be frank on everything, but be open to the media in a crisis situation, irrespective of even it's your adversary. And that pays off. In Maldives, for example, we knew the people were Tamil mercenaries from Sri Lanka, from a terrorist organization called the Plot. And we went to town in the Tamil provinces of Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Lovely comments about, sir, the operation in Maldives, and also about what actually happened in Kargil. You were the High Commissioner then in Pakistan, and you must have had a detailed interaction with the Pakistani media. And I go to Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain. Sir, first of all, thank you very much, sir. Honor and privilege to have you on board, sir, in this webinar. So we'd like to understand from you, what has been your experience, sir, as far as, you've served in the glacier, you've spoken a lot about the glacier. We all know what happened in 1984. And, sir, about Kargil, about your other experiences, especially in the Kashmir Valley, which can really be a hybrid warfare nightmare, sir, because the internet is playing up, the media is playing up all the time. It's a cauldron. Sir, your comments, please.
Thank you, Jayhind, and thank you, Gaurav. And my compliments to all my fellow panelists. My deep salams to Ambassador Parthasarathi, who he and I happen to be both chancellors of the two central universities on either side of the Peer Panjan. That's information for everyone also. As far as your question is concerned, thank you. It's a wonderful idea to have this webinar, and in the short time that I have available with me to speak, you would win me the right cue actually. But 1 minute spent on a few theoreticals, I would say information today is power. And the uncertainty of conflict demands that information flows to the people. That's the essence of media in conflict. No government can do without information flowing to the public. Either in failure or in success, the government will need support of the people. And in whatever form information flows, the truth or the contrived truth or whatever, information has to flow to the people. So the media will always be there in some form or the other. Conflicts today are very, very complex. You have all kinds of things like what you're seeing on the line of actual control, on the LOC, standoffs. You've got conventional war, you've got CICT operations, you have fourth generation warfare, you've got the kind of operation, expeditionary operation in Maldives and things like that. Each has got its own rules, and no one single rule can apply anywhere. Having said that, let me come to a few experiences. I still remember Sri Lanka, and my first experience as a reasonably senior officer with about 15 years of service, how the photograph on a major magazine cover showing the bodies of troops of your regiment, Gaurav, of your regiment, a unit of your regiment, the bodies of our own troops on the cover of a major magazine in India. I was shocked. Which country in the world does that? You don't put photographs of bodies of your own troops with the mess tins strewed around here and there and weapon magazines and the LTT standing behind and looking at it. It's the worst kind of communication you can ever think of. And that got me thinking ever since then of how important it is for media to be sensitive to the needs of the nation and the needs of the armed forces at particular times. I can admit that the most respected
I think we'll just wait for General Hasnain. His internet seems to have frozen for a bit. I think we'll just give it 30 seconds, and then we'll move to Gaurav if it's not resolved. Okay. I think what we should do is move to Gaurav Sawant. And as soon as General Hasnain comes back, then Gaurav, I'm going to shuffle around and sort of.
Sure.
And thank you. Gaurav, please, your experiences in covering conflict. You've covered, apart from Kargil, you've covered a lot of stuff outside India as well, Gaurav. So what's your take? What's your take?
So, Ambassador Parthasarathi and I have had the privilege of reporting when both were in harness. Ambassador Parthasarathi, when he was High Commissioner in Pakistan, I've interacted with him at the height of the Kargil war, and General Hasnain when he was commanding the Chinar Corps, again in a very difficult situation. I was reporting, and I was reporting from ground. When it comes to the Kargil war, there's a story, if I may, just for a moment. My editor at the Indian Express newspaper, Mr. Shekhar Gupta, used to tell us this story about his interactions with General Sundarji at the height of the Bofors scandal. And these Bofors played a very crucial role in the Kargil war. But Shekhar Gupta told me that General Sundarji, when he'd gone to interview him, used to say, all you journalists who are writing so much about these 155mm howitzers, do you even know the difference between a bore and a caliber? He says most journalists are big bores of low caliber. So, that is what the army thinks of the media by and large. But it also remains a fact that in this day and age, you cannot do without media. If there is conflict, the media will be there. You like them, you hate them. You just cannot do without the media. And we're seeing this. We're seeing this in Jammu and Kashmir. We're seeing this at the line of control. We're seeing at the line of actual control. And we're seeing this overseas. So the best way is to perhaps have a harmony. You tell the media what's actually happening. And then if there's a working relationship, then you decide on what goes to the people and what does it. And when I say you, it is not the army that decides, but it's the country. It's in harmony. You decide what's of national importance and what's not. For example, in the Kargil war, I knew before the operation for Tiger Hill that this operation was going to happen, but we did not report that. At the same time, we reported what our armed forces desperately needed, whether it was in terms of high altitude equipment, weapon locating radars, all the things that we were pointing out. There were a lot of emergency procurement was happening because the system came under pressure to deliver, which it wasn't delivering. For example, the ATPQ-37s, the weapon locating radars, you wanted them for a long time. DRDO kept saying, hum banayenge, hum banayenge, hum banayenge. Neither did they make it, and not having it had a detrimental impact. It came pretty soon. 155mm howitzers, they won you the war, but it took decades for new ones to come. Let me come back to today's day and age. At the line of actual control, you are having friction with China. I've reported from Daulat Beg Oldie. Now, why did this happen? Because at one point of time, the Chinese were saying that they did not want Indian infrastructure to be developed in that area. There were reports that were coming in, and this is where that hybrid warfare and fifth columnists play a very crucial role. They started putting out media reports saying India is scared, India is unable to build the road, Chinese are interdicting that road, Chinese are dominating that road, India cannot cross that kilometer 120 at Galwan because the Chinese are virtually sitting on the road. All of that happened. How could the army put out the truth? Sources kept telling us that no, that's not true, that's not true. Ultimately, I drove down from Durbuk to Shok to all the way up to Daulat Beg Oldie. Now, when a private television channel in the country drives down and shoots that journey, again, we took care. Armies deployed on either sides. You don't want that deployment to come out on television or for the adversary to know. Of course, satellite imagery, he will know. But you don't want him to know everything or buttress his facts. We took care. We shot what we needed to shoot. We did not shoot what the army told us at that point of time that you should not shoot in national interest. And we went all the way up to Daulat Beg Oldie, and all those Chinese lies about interdicting that road, they were no longer, valid, because on ground, media was able to show you the truth. Can I just take a moment and give you one more example about the importance of information warfare? When the Pakistanis did the Pulwama terror attack, India went and hit back at Balakot. Now, this is perhaps the biggest step India has taken in response to Pakistan's state-sponsored terror. But look at the information warfare. No pictures, no images. India saying something, Pakistan saying they just came and, felled a couple of trees and killed a couple of crows. That is where information and narrative building becomes extremely important. It was Pakistan that told us that Indian Air Force aircraft came and did something. Now that is where information warfare becomes extremely important, to seize the moment, get on top of it, and drill home that narrative. 1 year later, now the Pakistanis have admitted that this is what the Indians did, but the impact of the damage. And Air Chief Marshal Dhanwa kept telling me, that look, we've done it. We just don't have pictures to prove it. If he said we put in the spice bombs, if we wanted to show pictures to a media, perhaps we would have thrown a couple of 1,000-pounders also, just for impact, to show for everyone to see. The adversary knows the impact. It's very important for the nation also to know the impact, Gaurav.
Yeah, thank you, Gaurav. Very well said. And I think it also goes to show that, in your heart, apart from a brilliant journalist, also there is a responsible Indian citizen, a patriot, because you deliberately chose not to show. You could have turned your camera a little bit. And both of us are from the media. We know how the camera works. Just turn it a little bit and you can see everything. You chose not to show it. And I think hats off to you. I'll come back to General Hasnain, sir. Apologies. We lost you for a while, sir. And I'd request you to please complete your comments before I go to Aarti.
Okay, I still have about 2 or 2.5 minutes left on that comment.
Absolutely.
What I was alluding to was that one of the most respected journalists in Sri Lanka or anywhere else was the famous BBC journalist Mark Tully. And I think he was perhaps the best example of credibility. Because the moment he reported anywhere, that's the kind of credibility you need. I would put Gaurav Sawant in that kind of a mold today, that he has gone up there at DBO, come back with those reports from there, given out information from there, and the credibility of our claims has enhanced. I'll give you the example of Siachen. I think the Pakistan Army has made use of the media very, very appropriately. What it has done is, they know very well that they are nowhere near the Saltoro, they are nowhere near the Siachen Glacier. But the public of Pakistan still believes as if the Pakistani army is sitting right there. They're sitting in the Siachen Glacier. They're talking about mutual withdrawal. The public doesn't know that there can never be a mutual withdrawal in Sri Lanka, in Siachen, because the only army which is occupying Siachen is the Indian army. Where is the Pakistan army there? But for the past 36 years, the media has been kept in the dark, or the media has deliberately alluded to what the Pakistan army wanted to be believed, and that's exactly the game being played out. My last comment in a minute, in a place like Kashmir, I still remember a day when I had a huge agitation on my hands because of the rumor of a particular rape which had been carried out, done by 2 RR soldiers. And I remember my staff coming to me and saying, sir, the spokesman will go there, the PRO will go there and speak to the media and deny it. I said, no. This is the time when I, as the corps commander, have to be there. The media believes me. I must sit up to them, sit with media, explain to them, and the credibility of the system has to be established. And you will be happy to know that within minutes it went off from the air. Immediately, it was a credible denial. Similar thing happened with the killing of a young Kashmiri. I still remember taking advice from the local media, and they telling me, put the truth into a ticker on NDTV, and that's exactly what we did that day. At that time, NDTV was very, very popular. We put a ticker message on it at 11 o'clock at night, and it went off. All the rumor mongering went off the air immediately. What I'm trying to finally say is, the truth always prevails, and the media is a very, very important instrument in telling.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. Aarti, coming to you now. You see, I think all the 3 panelists so far, whether it's Mr. Parthasarathy or General Hasnain or Gaurav Sawant, you see this entire thing about media, how to manage the media, and finally tell the truth, because there is no substitute for the truth. That is number one. Number two, very importantly, that I've picked up today is also the fact that while there may be people like Gaurav Sawant here, a journalist like Gaurav Sawant, who say that, okay, this is my duty as a journalist, but I also have a duty as an Indian. Not many journalists would be responsible to that degree, saying that, it could cost lives of soldiers. It could be detrimental to India's national interest. Where do you think, Aarti, you need to find the balance between the national interest and your duty as a journalist? Well, balance kahan se milega? Where do you find that balance? Aarti, you've muted yourself. Can you please unmute yourself, Aarti? I think you muted yourself. Yeah, please continue. Please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Thank you, Gaurav, for giving me this opportunity to speak with the best that we have in terms of strategic affairs and defense reporting. I want to start with one big theoretical point. Democracies are at a huge disadvantage when it comes to reporting facts and reporting truth, especially in a conflict zone where a democracy is pitted against a dictatorship. India, a democracy pitted against a military dictatorship, that is Pakistan, in Kashmir. So truth becomes the first casualty, even if the fact that, as General Hasnain was saying, that it is important to give information. It's important to produce information and let people know what the truth is. That said, it remains a huge disadvantage for a democracy because the other side, which is a dictatorship, the other side, which has no qualms about censoring information, which has no issues about hiding facts from their own audience, is going to always attack you, is always going to put you on a back foot, is always going to corner you when it comes to facts and truth. Now just think about it. 30 years ago, when Islamist insurgency began in Kashmir, I was a child. I am from Kashmir. And although I would say, mostly journalists don't talk about their own identity when it comes to their profession. They don't talk about their personal stories when it comes to, being in the field. I think my own identity has always been a disadvantage because I worked in the same field where I became a victim of insurgency, of Islamist insurgency, which was backed by Pakistan. But why am I talking about this, identity, my own personal identity? Because you see, 30 years ago, when the insurgency began in Kashmir, it was an insurgency backed, sponsored by Pakistani military. And who was running this insurgency? It was not as if the majority of Kashmir was running this insurgency against the Indian state or against the entire Kashmiri Pandit or Kashmiri Muslim community. It was a minority. It was a certain minority which was backed by Pakistan, which was armed by Pakistan, which was trained by Pakistan. But within no time, this narrative became the narrative of the Pakistani military in Kashmir. If you look at the foreign press of the time, if you look at even the Indian press of the time, you will not once see any mention of ethnic cleansing, genocide of Kashmiri Pandit community, which I come from. It did not mention, you will not see any reportage saying that this insurgency is aimed against the people of Kashmir, which meant both Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims. Nowhere will you see foreign press or even Indian press saying that this insurgency is killing and destroying Kashmir itself. It was not a mass movement in favor of Kashmiri rights or Kashmiri democracy or democracy of India. It was targeted against minorities of Kashmir. It was targeted against the majority of Kashmir who were silenced by gun. So the narrative in the last 30 years became that India is the oppressor, India is the enemy of Kashmir, India is the evil occupation in Kashmir, whereas Pakistan military, whereas the militants became the freedom fighters, they became the ones who were upholding the rights of ordinary Kashmiris. Now this is turning logic on its head. This is turning facts on their head. So
absolutely.
When we say information is important, we must give information to people. You have to question that in an asymmetric, that's what we call asymmetric warfare, in an asymmetric conflict zone where you have democracy versus dictatorship, where you have a country which is following the rule of law, a country which goes by the institutions, which goes by the mechanisms of a democratic republic, and the other country which goes by the invisible spy agency, ISI, which is functioning as a proper state in Kashmir, the kind of asymmetry that they created completely distorted the truth. So what
Okay,
is truth?
Aarti,
At the
sure,
end of the day,
sure.
what is truth? What
Yes,
is my truth?
yes.
What is the truth of
Okay,
India in Kashmir? What is the truth of majority in Kashmir? So
okay.
my question to the entire panel today is that even though we have freedom of press, I think freedom of press becomes a huge disadvantage in a democracy when a dictatorial power is involved in the conflict zone. I'll leave
Right.
it at that and I'll come
Jay.
back to my own personal experience as a journalist in Kashmir later.
Yes. Thank you very much, Aarti. We now go to Anna. Anna joins us from Israel. Anna, thank you very much for joining us. Anna, there's this huge, thing about Israel being surrounded by enemies. Israel has fought wars ever since its inception, and ever since it was there. And in the 40s, when it was sort of again, people were brought in. The immigrants were brought into Israel. Also, even in the Indian Army, there is much talk about Israel. I was mentioning to you yesterday, Anna, that in my Part B paper, we had 2-3 questions, about General Moshe Dayan. So that was my first introduction to General Moshe Dayan, because he was part of the Part B paper, and I was expected to write about him now. And I wanted to, how do you cover it? You guys are perpetually in a state of conflict. Israel is surrounded by enemies. You've had the worst of experiences, right? And so the media has a very important role to play. But somehow, I don't know how it happens, but somehow, at least to the outsider, I don't know what the truth is, that you will enlighten us, but to an outsider, it looks that Israel is at the top of its game as far as the media is concerned. What happens? How is it done? How do you guys cover conflict?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say we're at the top of our game. First of all, thank you so much for being on this
Anna,
panel.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Anna, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
You are unmuted, Anna, but
I can hear you. I can hear you, Anna.
Okay.
Okay, now Anna, please speak.
Okay. So thank you for having on this panel. It's great to be. I'm going to start off by saying it's not always on the top of its game, especially when it comes to covering conflict. We've seen the David birth of Goliath with the Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank. Israel, despite its soldiers doing its best, really not to inflict any casualties, is always, Arti said, it's flipped. And many times the Palestinians are taking operations or soldiers and turning it to where in reality they were the ones who started the conflict. I want to bring up two main stories that I remember covering in the recent past. I think over the past 2 years, 3 years. One of them was with our on the northern border against Hezbollah. When Hezbollah in summer of last year fired a guided missile at a post and an ID ambulance along the border. Nobody knew it was on. We were all getting alerts on Twitter. If we were getting it on the news, nobody knew what was going on. We heard that a vehicle had hit, troops being evacuated by helicopter. The Israeli army was not talking to us journalists, as military journalists. We would call it a censor, because in Israel, unlike other countries, there is a censor, which does not allow us to publish a lot of information, which is something that I want to discuss as well. We weren't getting any information. Saying reports of a vehicle being hit, possible Israeli casualties. 2 hours later, 3 hours later, the army came out and said, no, nothing happened. No soldiers were injured. Can anyone hear me? Can you guys hear me?
I'm
Anyone hear me?
hearing you, Anna. I'm hearing you.
Hearing me? Great. Okay, because I see some people are not hearing me. So back to that story. It took a good 3 hours.
Yeah, I've got you on a different line, so I can hear you. I don't know about Mr. Parthasarathy. Aarti, can you hear Anna? No.
I'm hearing you.
You're hearing me?
So, Anna, please continue.
Okay.
Her voice is.
I'll continue. So what happened with the military is that 3 hours later, and this is all a ruse in order to fool Allah into thinking that they had actually injured Israeli soldiers. And so that the tension along the northern border, which had been building in the weeks prior to that, would dissipate, which it did, but at the same time led to a lot of a lack of trust between reporters and military, trust which is important to have, especially in Israel, like you said, which is surrounded by enemies, which is constantly in conflict, and where the reporters in Israel, the military reporters in Israel, have a very close connection with the higher ups in the army, even the chief of staffs, on a first basis, which does not happen in many countries as well. So you have a whole group of reporters which were fooled by the military and were really able to report the truth to the public. Now, a year later, right now, in northern is again very, very tense. And weeks ago, or be it a month, Verona, the track of time, there were reports that tried to infiltrate Israel into a military post, but were thrown back by forces. There were no casualties to either side. Again, the IDF wasn't saying much. They weren't releasing any videos. And so
Sure.
Of last year. Do we trust?
Absolutely, Anna. I'm going to request you to stop here, and I'll come back to you, Anna, in a few minutes. I'm sorry, your voice was breaking, and this is something that both our countries seem to be having in common. Internet is not very dependable. It's not dependable here in India as well. So I'll go back to Mr. P. Parthasarathy, G. Parthasarathy. Yes, sir, one question which I wanted to ask you, and since you have an insider's perspective into how the media is managed in Pakistan. So there is this PEMRA, sir, which is the Electronic Regulatory Authority, sir, which pretty much controls media in Pakistan. Now we hear about how journalists frequently disappear in Pakistan. Very recently, we heard about Matiullah Jan, who was kidnapped, sir. And Matiullah disappeared for 2-3 days. He had gone to drop off his wife. She's a school teacher. So, and there are so many cases, sir. And Hamid Bir was shot. He still carries those 2 bullet wounds. And he very proudly says in his Twitter bio that I was shot twice for telling the truth. And now there are many cases. And I guess the Pakistani media, since it has reported under the overhang of nuclear dictators, it has a different take on the government, something that we in India take for granted. I mean, of course, the government, the state government or the central government can certainly hassle a few people, put people in jail for a while to trouble them, but nothing bad actually happens unless some criminal elements decide to take matter in their own hands. But there in Pakistan, it is very much part of the deep state's policy. So, journalists are killed. Scores of journalists have been killed in Pakistan. It's one of the unsafest places, if I may say, for journalists. What was your takes? I mean, you covered it when Pakistan was getting a hammering in Kabul. So Gaurav Sawant was covering it from this side of the line of control, and you were covering it from that side of the line of control, sir. What was your take? How was it different in Pakistan, sir?
Look, it was a mixed bag. Most journalists, particularly from the Urdu media, were scared. Their owners were vulnerable. They were vulnerable. People could just disappear. And that was a fact of life. But despite that, I did find, for example, with Maliha Lodhi, on the day before the surrender of Musharraf, Nawaz Sharif to President Clinton, she asked me in a look, you have been very reticent, which is unlike you. What are you to say now about what our Prime Minister is doing in Washington? And I said he's gone there to surrender and to tell the truth of the perils of your misadventure in Kargil. I call it the perils of your Kargil misadventure. We are reaching the end game of the perils of your Kargil misadventure. The next day she put it on the headlines. End game says Indian and war. But then everybody knew then, I guess, that there's very little left. So you don't find courageous people like that. But even Maliha now is under huge pressure. Others are under huge pressure. And you saw what happened to Cyril Almeida.
Yes, sir.
Of
Yes,
the
sir.
Dawn. He was just
Yes,
sacked, poor fellow, for reporting what the Prime Minister told him, or the Prime Minister's office told him. So, on a conversation with the military. So, I think as long as Pakistan, the ultimate authority is the military, civilian government is just is there for minor issues. But on security issues, the last word is the military. In many cases, even the Prime Minister may not be informed. And I know for a fact that they had to take the permission of the army chief to come to India. So, but though Nawaz was somewhat more gutsy. So I think the problem really is, I always tell my Pakistani friends that every country has an army, but in Pakistan, the army has a country. That's the reality.
Sure. Sir, I'll go to General Hasnain now. So my question is in two parts. So first of all, we have all these books by Pakistani generals. Like, for example, Major General Akbar Khan, who wrote a book called Raiders in Kashmir, sir. And he frankly says in that book that we invaded India and we used Qabilis or tribals from the frontier areas, now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And we invaded India. Then you have In the Line of Fire, written by Pervez Musharraf, in which he says, yes, we came. Then there are autobiographies and biographies of both Yahya Khan and Ayub Khan. In spite of all these written records, and there are many books by their diplomats, their bureaucrats, etc., their academicians in Pakistan. But in spite of these things, I mean, the normal Pakistani still believes in a kind of a narrative that is full of conspiracy theories, sir. I mean, this is on record. Pervez Musharraf says that Osama bin Laden is a hero, and they say, nahi, hame frame kara hai and sazish hai. This is the first part of my question, sir. And the second part of my question is that, sir, Kashmir is also a hotbed of conspiracy theories, sir. I hear so many conspiracy theories. I was there a week back, sir. And I always come back with half a dozen conspiracy theories, sir. Right from how Pulwama was an inside job to how one person, sir, one guy who had a shikara now waiting for tourists because there are very less tourists right now. He actually said that removal of Article 370 and 35A is a conspiracy because Delhi still has 370 and 35A, Rajasthan still has it, Punjab has it, only we don't have it. So the rest of India has 370 and 35A, you've taken away ours. How do you deal with all this? First the Pakistan question and now Kashmir, sir. Sir, you're muted, sir. General Hasnain, sir, you're muted, sir.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you so much. Excellent questions. And I'll take a cue from what Aarti was saying to respond to these two questions. I'll try and sort of sync these together. You see, Aarti, what happened in 1990, you must remember, is that
General Hasnain's internet has, I think, frozen. We'll wait for 30 seconds.
From Afghanistan.
I heard him briefly, very briefly.
So sorry.
Hello. So you're audible now, sir? You're audible now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. There was a bit of a glitch. What I was trying to tell Aarti was that in 1990, when this issue of the Kashmiri Pandit, this thing was going on, the tragedy was going on, it was a time you should try and compare what was the situation as far as the Indian handling of media and the Pakistani handling of media. The Pakistanis were past masters. The ISPR had been set up in 1949. They understood information as a weapon system. India has not understood information as a weapon system till today. Let me tell you, right? They always believed that as a smaller nation, a weaker nation, information would always be the power game. So they professionalized it. The ability to tell a half-truth, the ability to speak many lies and make it appear like a truth. This is exactly what Gaurav is asking me. The fact that there are plain truths, but the public in Pakistan doesn't believe anything. And in Kashmir, the narratives, we have never been able to get our narratives to be spoken out there because we don't professionalize the understanding of media, and that media is a weapon by itself as a part of the spectrum of conflict where media and information are very, very, very important elements. So I think in India, we will have to go many more miles yet before we can really compete. Last year, the ISPR was very thrilled that in London, I went and spoke and I said publicly, the ISPR has done a marvelous job for this country. Oh, the ISPR put me in the headlines everywhere. And they said, see, the former Corps commander has spoken that we are the most competent. There's no doubt they were not understanding that what I was saying was they were most competent in speaking the half-truth and putting out lies repeatedly and making it the truth. It was hardly a compliment to them, but you know the thickness of the Pakistani brain and the mind. This is what it leads them to believe in themselves. So what I want to allude to finally is media and conflict in India. We need to understand this much more. We need to professionalize this much more. I can still remember many times in my growth process in the army, whenever I said, sir, can we call the media in? The media, keep it far away from here. Don't allow anything. The army used to shun the media. Now, whenever there is a major success, you're looking for the media. The issue is when you have a failure, how do you manage the failure with the help of the media? The media won't come to you at that time. You have to draw the media to you, and you have to know how to manage the media at times when you have failed, when you are failing or you have failed. These are the issues which we in the armed forces have not understood yet, let alone the nation.
Gaurav, let me come to you and take off from what General Hasnain said. Now, Gaurav, my question is to you. Do you feel you are from a Fauji family, you've seen the army all your life, you've covered conflict, and you have a certain pedigree when it comes to covering conflict. You've been doing it for years and years and years. I want to ask you, do you feel media and social media are actually weapons of war, like General Hasnain said? Do you believe that the armed forces should actually start engaging with the media differently? Because I know for sure that what General Hasnain is saying is absolutely correct, and the way we manage media is absolutely suboptimal. I mean, we can do a far, far better job should we put our minds to it. But first, there has to be a realization that there is something called media, and it has to be managed, right? You did not turn your cameras towards the line of actual control on the Indian deployment. You went all the way to Daulat Beg Oldi. That was a personal decision from your side, but not many media persons would have gone that way. They would have said, "Acha, theek hai, TRP aa rahi hai, it's a good thing. Let's do it." You know how the excitement is in the TV studios. So, what do you think? Do you think it's a weapon of war? Do you think it can be used as a weapon in conflict?
Media, undoubtedly, information is a weapon of war, and information dissemination to the nation and to the adversary both are extremely, extremely important, Gaurav. We've seen this multiple times. We've seen this in Kargil when we gave open access, when we as journalists had open access to information. Yes, some things went wrong, but those were lessons that we learned. For example, when some people did what they did, there were military casualties, and I was able to see military casualties. So that was a lesson learned, that one mistake by the media and lives are lost. That cannot happen. But look at that trust factor, that when a Tiger Hill operation was being planned, or when an operation in Batalik sector was being planned, I was sitting right there watching those plans being made, because I was staying with the army. I wasn't an embedded journalist. In fact, the army wanted me arrested and out of that area, because we were giving the truth about some of the casualties that we were facing, or the absence of equipment that was hurting us. But the fact is, we were able to build a national morale, and that helped. Remember, we weren't able to do that during Operation Parakram. So without fighting a war, we were losing. In terrorism, we are not being able to send out the truth. Look, there is hybrid warfare. And if I may, just for 30 seconds, because look at Batla House encounter. I was amongst the first journalists to reach Batla House when an encounter was taking place. A dreaded terrorist organization like the Indian Mujahideen, their Delhi module was neutralized. And yet for decades, what were we battling as a country? That innocent people are being killed. That entire narrative was being built. The Delhi police was so scared that they were giving us no information. I knew Inspector Mohan Chand Sharma and the team personally. So we were able to put out facts about how information came about those terrorists being there, how they were neutralized. Ishrat Jahan, another case where everybody knew that a terrorist module of Lashkar-e-Taiba from Pakistan had been neutralized. Yet we were not, a narrative was being built against it. That narrative building by Ghulam Nabi Fai of Pakistan and their elements, that is something that needs to be countered in future hybrid warfare, whether that's happening at the line of control, line of actual control, or within our country. India is actually fighting on 3 different fronts, and information is a very important weapon of war, Gaurav, if I may.
Yes, thank you, Gaurav. Very interesting. With that, I go to Aarti. And Aarti, you're a proud Kashmiri and you've spoken very eloquently about Kashmir. And my question is, like, for example, there was this Varghese committee report, and there were other reports from the army and the police and the JK administration, and they speak about Kunan Poshpora. And now this Kunan Poshpora thing was blown out of proportion, and later on, the Varghese committee report actually, which was a neutral one-person committee, they said that nothing like this happened, and it was it was all created out of thin air. Where did we go wrong as a country that we were not able to counter Pakistani propaganda? Because even today, if you go to Kashmir, there are vast sections of people who believe that Kunan Poshpora actually happened, which means that if you build capabilities, you can concoct lies out of thin air. And if you keep on repeating them, like Joseph Goebbels said, they will be believed to be the truth. Aarti. Aarti, you've muted yourself, I think, Aarti, if you can.
Can you?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to give a brief context in which media reporting on Kashmir has happened. In 1990, Islamist insurgency breaks out, and one of the first few people who were targeted were actually journalists. Journalists who are working for national newspapers, national media at that time. It was mostly Doordarshan. If you remember, Doordarshan chief was attacked. There were attacks on national media in Kashmir. My family, which was the distributor of national magazines and newspapers to the entire district that I come from in Kashmir, we were targeted, we were threatened, we were asked to leave. So the entire journalistic fraternity, which was in a way purveyor of truth in Kashmir, it was destroyed. Right now, who takes over that entire industry in Kashmir? The people who had no expertise in journalism, the people who had no training in journalism, the people who had sympathies with Pakistan, the people who had sympathies with Jamaat-e-Islami, Hizbul Mujahideen, JKLF, they controlled media in Kashmir. Therefore, for us or for anybody to expect that something else, a real picture, the real truth about Kashmir would come out is nonsensical, because it would not have. Then what happens? Some years later, when India has this mushrooming of news channels, and suddenly we have 24/7 news channels, and day after day we have new reporters without any historical understanding of the Kashmir conflict, because they have no training, no history understanding, they have no professional understanding of what Kashmir conflict was, how it erupted, what happened in 70 years. They start paratrooping Kashmir and they start projecting the reality which does not exist in Kashmir to the audience in India and the rest of the world. We have the celebrity journalists telling us that Kashmiri Pandits were killed because they were elite. I mean, that is the kind of understanding we have had in Indian media. Then we have Indian media, which is focusing all their energies on human rights violations committed by the security forces and the Indian state. Now, I'm not denying that human rights violations did not happen. They did happen, because in the initial years, the security forces were completely taken aback by this new warfare of which they had no experience, no understanding whatsoever. And the state did not even know how to grapple with the hordes of Islamists trained by Pakistan coming into Kashmir. There were Afghanis, there were other foreign mercenaries coming to Kashmir, killing and massacring people left, right, center. But the focus of Indian media in the 90s, in the 2000s, was human rights violations committed by the Indian state, completely overlooking, ignoring what the Pakistani invisible state was doing in Kashmir, completely forgetting who these people were, who were they being trained from, and how this entire insurgency was being sustained. Now, when you talk of these, Human Rights Commission reports, of course, so for example, Kunan Poshpura, we will actually never get to know what the real truth about Kunan Poshpura is. But the allegation was so outlandish to begin with that, any person with common sense would have questioned that how can soldiers swoop on a village and rape hundreds of women overnight. So, the problem with us at that point obviously was that our state was not equipped with the understanding of information warfare. It was not equipped with the understanding of what this insurgency was to begin with, what its objective was. And third, we did not have a responsible media. We did not have a media which was trained to think rationally, analytically, historically, and logically. And fourth, of course, the commissions that we set up were, again, I would say, not as professional as they are nowadays. One-person commission, one-man commission, without the support structure of establishing facts. Fact finding is a process. It involves several arms and institutions of the state. It involves civil society, but there was none. The civil society had been gagged in Kashmir. The civil society was not active at all. Even till date, it is not active, because your media in Kashmir is controlled by the Pakistani spy agency and by Pakistani state in Kashmir. So what I'm essentially saying is that Pakistan had an advantage. It's a dictatorship. It has the advantage of knowing what information warfare is. It used foreign media, it used its own media, it used Kashmir media, and it also used Indian mainstream media to further its goal.
Right. Thank you very much, Aarti. You said that at that point in time in 1989-90, when this entire thing exploded in our faces, we did not know how to use the media. I can assure you nothing has changed. We still don't know how to use the media. So it's there. We are still there. Like General Hasnain said, no, we still, we have miles to go before we can actually think of this. And even Gaurav commented on this. Anna, I'll come to you. And my question is slightly different, away from the topic that we are discussing. And I'd like to understand this entire thing of conscription in Israel. So everybody is required to serve in the Israeli military, both men and women, for a certain period of time, and then go back to whatever professions they were in now. Obviously, this requires this requires a great deal of motivation amongst the people also. Because a small country geographically, outsized achievements in terms of the PhDs and the innovation, whether in space, whether in agriculture, whether in vaccines, Israel is leading the world. Now, this comes at a certain cost, because it seems to an outsider that Israel is perpetually under siege. There are enemies all around. I want you to come back on this point. We could not hear part of your statement earlier. I would like you to come back on this point and tell us, how does Israel handle all this? It's like a pressure cooker to an outsider, to an Indian. It seems like you guys are living in a pressure cooker, but at the same time doing extremely well. You churn out PhDs like they're cookies. I mean, nobody has as many PhDs like Israel does. They're conveyor belt of PhDs in Israel. How does that happen? How does the media manage all this? Anna, there's a problem in your internet. I'm sorry. Apologies to all the people who are listening in. There is a Anna. Would you like to exit and come in again? Would you like to exit and come again, please? Let's see if that makes sense. Yeah, please. We'll wait for you. Thank you.
Gaurav, while Anna is coming in, can I interject with a small for a few seconds?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely, sir.
I was just wondering. You see, there are age-old concepts which have been tried out about embedded journalism and things like that.
Sure.
In India, we started in the army. We started a course for journalists in Mau some years ago.
Sure.
After, I think, 2 or 3 serials, that whole thing died out.
Sure.
Information warfare as a course by the Indian Army, it doesn't attract that kind of attention by anyone. Is there anything, I'm somehow, if Gaurav can give us an idea, Gaurav Sawant can give us an idea, somehow how to generate this interest in our society and in our armed forces. Sorry, Anna is back, so we'll hear her first.
Okay.
Yeah, Anna, please continue.
Okay, I was in my bomb shelter. Every Israeli has a bomb shelter, so maybe that was it. So I'll get back to Israel's draft happens right after high school. So many Israelis don't go to university. They don't go and get their PhD right away. They come in at 18 and they serve for 2 years, depending on what unit in the army they're in. And then with that, afterwards, they go and either go on a year-long trip, they actually come to India, and then they go to higher education. Now, in terms of, again, the media in Israel and this pressure cooker that we seem to be living in, not many of us feel that way every day here. Certainly as a military reporter, I do, because I look on every single border that I have, and all of them are very tense. Maybe the one with Egypt is the quietest one that we have right now, except for drug smuggling. But again, our northern border, extremely tense. It's beautiful. It's super quiet. And you can drive along the border and you don't see anything. But one thing you really don't see is that there are no military vehicles driving along the border these days. Because for the past 3 months, the Israeli military has been banned because of tensions with Hezbollah. Now, along Gaza, it's extremely tense. We had 1 rocket last night. Out of the blue, at around 9 o'clock at night, a rocket was fired towards a residential community. And you think to yourself, this is happening on a Friday night, out of the blue. How do we respond to this? Now, Israel usually responds by striking a Hamas outpost on the border. If there's more than one rocket, then there'll be a much stronger response, and the Israeli military very quickly picks that up and reports it. And last night there was nothing. There was no response. There were a few tweets, a report on the news. Other than that, the Israeli media is very, especially the defense correspondents, are very aware that we are also responsible for either releasing that tension in the pressure cooker or helping it boil up. And so again, what I wanted to discuss before, when my internet connection was not great, is that the Israeli military and the military reporters have a very, very, very close relationship. One that, you know, as someone who grew up in Canada and not in Israel, I was shocked when I saw that. But at the same time, the Israeli military reporters are very critical. And when you sit in during briefings with military officers and you see this close friendship, but this close critical friendship with the army, it's one that, you know, it makes it feel like this is a country, a real democracy, where the military is questioned with every move that they do. But again, like in my first discussion, we have the censor, the military censor, which prevents reporters from publishing a lot of information, which is very problematic because there's only two other countries that have such an office, and that's North Korea and Syria. And does Israel really want to be Israel, the democracy Israel, you know, which you said puts PhD on a super high level? Does Israel really want to have a censor? Does a country not think that its military reporters, which have such a close relationship and understanding of its responsibility, do we really need a censor to stop us from publishing information? So it's a very interesting dynamic here and a very interesting relationship that I don't see in any other country in the world.
Thank you very much, Anna. And your statements remind me of, if I could draw a parallel in India, if all of us got to serve in the army, there would be regimental loyalties and course loyalties, and you would get the job done somehow, because these things are very strong in the Indian army. I don't know how they work in the Israeli army, but I would like to thank this entire panel, Mr. G. Parthasarathy sir, General Hasnain sir, Gaurav, Anna, and Aarti. Thank you very much. Friends, thank you very much for viewing. And it's been a wonderful panel, highly educative for me. And we'll be back soon, another week. And we're going to speak about some other topic with a similar panel, a high-profile panel. And I hope you enjoyed this show. Thank you very much for watching. And Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.